Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the Egyptian-French bilateral relations file. This is in light of President Sisi actually accepting the invitation of President Emmanuel Macron to visit France as a part of the Africa-France summit that will be taking place in Bordeaux in June, the upcoming June. And joining us here in the studio to shed more light on this issue is Dr. Rami Fahim, the strategic planning expert. We're also joined by Dr. Cherif Amir, the professor of strategic relations at Paris University. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Hold on.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding President Sisi accepting Macron's invitation to visit France next June, and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi accepted his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron's invitation to visit France and participate in the 28th Africa-France Summit from the 4th till the 6th of June 2020. Hassan Benam, the managing director of the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Egypt, said President el-Sisi would be accompanied by a huge business delegation during his planned visit in June. He said, noting that the summit is expected to play a key role in encouraging French companies to boost their investments in Egypt and use it as a hub for exporting to African markets. He also added Macron has already invited all African countries' heads of state to attend the event, adding that the high participation of African countries would strengthen the summit's success. He said over the last period the chamber had hosted a French delegation that met with several representatives of Egyptian business associations, such as the Federation of Egyptian Industries, Federation of Egyptian Chambers of Commerce, Arab Organization for Industrialization, and others. French-Egyptian relations are strong at all levels, including presidential, people-to-people, and business. President el-Sisi's visit to France is expected to witness the signing of several memorandums of understanding. These are to boost business cooperation, especially since Macron's historical visit to Egypt in January of 2019 witnessed the signing of about 32 MOUs. The agreements are very diversified, such as in the sectors of infrastructure, roads, building materials, tourism, culture, and construction. Meanwhile, President of the Senate's Culture Committee, Catherine Morin-Desailly, expressed the Senate's appreciation of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's development efforts in a meeting with the President in Cairo. Morin-Desailly, who headed a delegation from the French-Egyptian Friendship Group in the Senate, praised the President's efforts on the foreign level amid a disturbed regional situation in the Middle East, saying security and stability in the Middle East and Africa were contributed to Egypt. She voiced France's support to the efforts of the Egyptian President and state. She added that Paris can support Egypt in overcoming challenges and achieving economic reforms.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion right away. Dr. Amir, now, before we start talking about the upcoming visit by President Sisi to France, Bordeaux, in June, let's look at this latest visit that took place last week by the French members of the French Senate meeting President Sisi here in Cairo. Now, What is the significance of such a meeting? What were the main topics of discussion? The meeting was in light of the mutual cooperation between both countries, but what is the significance and the main topics discussed during that meeting?
Well, first of all, let's understand the role of the Senate and the Parliament there in France, the National Assembly, Assemblée Nationale. It's very important because they are the people who are controlling the lobby inside the French politics, meaning investment, arms deals, and all what we can imagine of mutual cooperation. So it's not only in the hands of the president, it's the hands also of the various chambers there. So I think that this meeting is about evaluation of the recent cooperation between the two countries. When they come to Cairo, they meet the head of state, or whenever they make any visit anywhere else, they make the evaluation and they go back to Paris, and in the lights of all these connections, they evaluate the cooperation with each country. Now in the Middle East, let's see, they have chosen Egypt, no other country, because obviously we are the honest partner, not only of France, but for the European Union. What's taking place with the blackmail between Turkey and the EU, and what we have seen that France is having a tough time with Erdogan, and they have criticized them. They criticized Erdogan, who's violating the ceasefire in Libya. At the same time, they said Egypt is the guarantor of peace in Libya. So that means that they have chosen their strategic partner in the Mediterranean. And today, at this hour that we're talking, there is also air force maneuvers between Egypt and France in the Mediterranean. So in all the puzzle, and the picture is complete now, that there is a straight connection between President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and President Emmanuel Macron. The parliament in France, who has a very strong authority, and Egypt. So the significance is clear. There is coordination, because this is an important topic now. France is very preoccupied about the security in the Mediterranean, and they need a real partner. So a real partner in economics and a real partner also in geopolitics. I'm optimistic because this invitation for President el-Sisi means also that President Macron is very keen to maintain this solid connection that he had with President Sisi, and in the meantime, he's very aware, not like other countries, he's very aware of the dangerous games and adventures made by Erdogan, and he criticized him openly. So now France is a real partner for Egypt, an honest partner, and they understand that Egypt now is a country of peace and also a country that's capable of maintaining the security and capable of defending investment, defending the gas fields, defending the security, the regional security in the Mediterranean and in Libya. So we're a complete partner, and we have also the cultural relationships between us and them.
Yes. Well, Dr. Fahim, we're going to be talking more extensively about the economic and cultural relations between France.
Can we just
yes, please,
add something here? It's, we talked previously about this, if you remember, that every country now wants to join our plan to not to penetrate, to develop Africa, because Africa is representing the bailout plan as we are now inside the Great Depression. And Africa, it needs lots of development, and this is how people can, if we develop Africa and we reach this win-win situation, we're going to save the world about what we're going to face in this Great Depression. Okay?
Yes.
So if you remember, we talked previously when it was with the J7, J8, and J8, and the Japanese. Everybody's trying to get close to our president just to try to join this plan. And I believe France are trying to do the same now. It's
Yes.
the same, yeah.
So France is basically trying to protect their interests of their investments and their economic and cultural cooperation with Egypt. But as Dr. Amir mentioned, there is a political dimension to such a meeting. Do you feel that Egypt and France share the same points of view, are on the same page in terms of trying to resolve some sort of, find some sort of a political or diplomatic, or not even so, a political solution for the Middle East crisis, these regional crises, notably Libya?
If we're joining each other in the plans of the socio-economic development for Africa, we're definitely joining each other in any political, in geopolitics and all aspects we can see in the next phase. Okay, we have the same goals and we have to reach the same objective together. So we will not, there will not be any kind of difference between us. It has the same points of view. As long as, in the end of the day, you know, I cannot now differentiate between economics and politics. Okay,
Yes.
I cannot really I cannot see the difference for the time being.
Well, Dr. Amir, do you think that there are other countries, I mean, you've mentioned Turkey and their involvement in the situation in the region now. Do you see other countries that maybe do not share the same points of view as Egypt and France? Where does Russia lie? Where do other members of the European Union lie within trying to resolve these crises in Libya and Syria? We've seen the situation with Austria yesterday and really coming to terms, trying to help enforce an arms embargo. How do you see the European Union and other European countries coming to terms with the points of view of Egypt and France, for instance?
Well, you just mentioned Russia. I think that President Emmanuel Macron was very clear the last few weeks, and something's happening in France's, in the French diplomatic relations. He said just yesterday, or 2 days ago, he said that the sanctions against Russia is useless, and it's harming not Russia, it's harming us, the European Union and France. And I think that this is the first time that now France is taking sides clearly in all the major aspects of conflicts in the region. This coordinates exactly with Egypt's vision. We have strong, excellent relations with Russia, especially on the case of Libya, and of course in Syria also. We are seeing now that there's a split between Russia and Turkey. So I think that the picture is becoming more and more clear. There is France, Egypt, Russia, who are three countries who are maintaining now their relations and the game in the Middle East. Egypt is the strong rock. Russia is very keen, and President Vladimir Putin is very interested in the stability of Egypt. And since 2011, we have seen our friends in Russia who are on our side. They never try to destabilize Egypt or criticize Egypt, especially after the revolution of 2013. So I think that this also is, we can call it the triangle of coordination in the intercontinental between France, Russia, and Egypt. And this is very important for Libya. If we can speak about other countries in the European Union, I think that there is diminishing force for several countries now. We have seen the Brexit, the British are out of the game now, especially that they are trying to maintain economic relations transatlantic with the Americans. So they're not really now very interested in the Middle East, in what's going on in the details. Germany, we know that they have suffered from the immigration, so they don't really want to be in a strong confrontation with Erdogan, who's playing this card with them. Italy, they are suffering from immigration and they have problems in internal politics. So the only country who is capable now in the European Union to express their voice is Emmanuel Macron, and I think that at a certain time he was focusing on that, and he realized that this is now the time. So it was very interesting that he chose Egypt to be its partner, not Qatar, because the Qataris have various investments in France. Even Paris Saint-Germain is bought by a Qatari. When you walk in the Champs-Élysées, they tell you that all these buildings are bought by Qatar. But although Qatar is very important for them economically, but when it comes to diplomacy, war, and also diplomatic stability, it's Egypt. And I think that he made the right choice. He understood now that the game in Libya cannot be resolved, not, of course, to our respect to our brothers in Tunisia and Algeria, but Egypt is the strong rock, and the key is in the hands of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. By the way, about the embargo, we have said it before in Egypt, the embargo, that the arms embargo that was imposed on Colonel Gaddafi is no longer in need now. We all know that Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, and by the way, the French never wanted to work with them, but the Egyptian diplomacy worked very strongly that General Khalifa Haftar must be accepted as the representative of the Libyan people, and we realized this goal, and now he's always invited in the Élysée in France. So coming back to the embargo that Austria is trying to enforce, well, I think that the Libyans now are fighting foreigners. It's not anymore a civil war. We have seen in the pictures the arms coming from Turkey, the mercenaries coming from Syria. Egypt told the French that you have to work on that, and we had all the connections with Macron to tell the European Union that this war now is about fighting foreign terrorism on the soil of Libya. So it's a war between the national army of Libya, and I think the French now do not endorse really an embargo. And we said it before, we do not interfere in the affairs of Libya, but the security of the Mediterranean is mutual importance for France and Egypt. So I think that now we are very clear that the European Union, and I think France will do it, have to work for the stability of Libya under the guidance of Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar to fight terrorism.
Yes. Dr. Fahim, now you've mentioned many times that a lot of the countries from the international communities, and mainly European countries as well, are interested in cooperation, economic cooperation and developmental projects with Africa and Egypt. Now, you've also mentioned the economic recession that is hitting the world economy. We've seen what France has been going through with the yellow vests and with the Brexit issue as well, the UK leaving the European Union. Do you feel that countries such as France going through their own turbulences is in a good, strong position to strengthen their cooperation with African states, namely Egypt? Does it put them in a more, let's say, desperate situation or need to strengthen their relations with African states?
Do they have any choice? They don't have. We said Africa is the bailout plan. Europe, yeah, they don't have any kind of resources, all Europe. The immigrants, they have a great need of immigrants. They have a problem of the youth level in their countries. Germany, they don't have any kind of workers. They have a great need of workers. So they need the immigrants. They don't need rebellions and this, but they don't. But they need workers. They just need them. They're facing lots of problems. The problem we were talking about, we're facing a fake economy in the whole world. So what is fake, what is real? We don't know for the time being. If you remember when we were talking that the whole debts of the world are by passing $260 trillion, and the whole money of the world is only $80 trillion. So you have a deficit of 320% of GDP versus the debts versus the GDP of the whole world. Come on, it's all fake. Over and above, we can see in the stock exchanges now the cryptocurrencies are strengthening, they're gaining so much power. The stock exchange we can see that they are leveling them mechanically till they can reach. Every country has its own benefit of why leveling mechanically for the time, but it won't take long, a month or two max. The second quarter is a disaster. We're going to see each other here, and we will remember. Second quarter will be a disaster before the elections of Trump and this, and we will see the real numbers in each country. So we're facing a disaster.
Yes.
France is facing a huge problem. The French economy, it's a disaster. We all know the numbers. But they have to do something, and they have a strong industry. We cannot forget that.
Yes.
So let's forget about the money. Let's remember the power of the industry. You can see even in the arms and ammunition, as Dr. Amir was saying, we are having beautiful planes from them. They're having great planes, and we're having lots of arms and munitions from all the EU.
Yes.
Over and above, it's this Great Depression is showing to you nobody is stronger than the other. We have to put our hands together if we want to bypass this recession or Great Depression. We have to put our hands together.
Yes. Well, Dr. Fahim, you're a strategic planning expert now. You've highlighted, and everybody really took notice of the Rafale fighter jets that we got from France, but President Macron actually made a historical visit to Egypt last January of 2019, which is a little bit over a year. What sort of progress has been made since then? Have you seen France really heavily intensifying their projects, their investments, the developmental projects and planning within the mega projects here in Egypt since then?
Anyway, you've mentioned that the Senate, the Parliament are coming. Okay, it's not that easy, the French Senate to move. I believe Dr. Amir maybe can concur about this, but it's not that easy. They don't move that much. Okay, so if they're moving with the president coming here, it's totally different. If we're talking about France, France and all the countries are waiting for Egypt to develop all the infrastructure, as we were talking before, and everybody is talking about how Egypt is going that fast in the infrastructure level. Okay, so they are waiting, and then they will start to come in. They need everything to be prepared, and that's what we're doing. Both of us are actually, we and all the countries, we're going to with certain planning, and we're doing fine with this planning. More than fine.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Amir, we understand the relationship between Egypt and France. It's historical. A cultural, strong relation, a political relations. It's basically a love affair between both countries. But do you feel that now is the time when this relationship between, the bilateral relationship between both countries can go up a few notches, take it to another level where they could make use of our geographical and political situation within the region, but how can we make use of their help and their involvement in the political relationship between Egypt and France? I mean, okay, we get the investments, we get the infrastructure and the help and the cultural cooperation and everything, but politically, how can we benefit from France?
Well, of course, we all heard about the Arab Spring. And I think this was an earthquake for the whole Middle East. And fortunately, Egypt was the only survival till now. We have seen Syria, Iraq, and everywhere. And I think that the French now are realizing, even Lebanon, we're seeing now what's happening now. So instability is everywhere. The French, at a certain time, they were always keen not to have any confrontation with the Iranians, for example, and they work for the nuclear deal. Now it's ruined. And I think that they know that it's going nowhere now with the Iranians. So and then when I was in France, and I used to say that Turkey would split with the European Union, and this was in 2016. They used to tell me this is our main partner that we cannot neglect. I think that now they understand that Turkey is dangerous for all of them. So the only remaining country now is Egypt, and we're coming to the point that you just mentioned, is historical relations. Egypt was always the gate for France, not only to Africa, but also to elsewhere in the Arab world and in the Middle East. So I think that, and many events, that's very, very weird, that many events in the geopolitically maintain the relations between the two countries. Look, for example, for instance, during the Second World War, Egypt was very keen to not to endorse the Vichy government, which was when France pro the Nazis, and France never forget that Egypt stood with the real French, free French government of de Gaulle. And then when the Suez crisis happened in 1956, then we had a close relationship after the Six-Day Wars in 1967, and France started to take good relations, make good relations with Egypt. Then at the era of President Sadat, the Camp David Accords made the French connections very important with Egypt, and they got more closer. And then at the time of President Mubarak, it was very important, the relationship, and we have seen the underground here in Egypt, and the bond between the late President Chirac and President Mubarak at that time. And during the 2011 uprising and what took place, I think that the French maybe they had to follow the European Union in supporting what was called the Arab Spring at that time. And they had this view that Sarkozy at that time, if we bomb Libya and then intervene in Egypt and intervene in Syria, we'll remake the map of the Middle East, which is the chaos and the order out of chaos. I think that now they understood very well that Egypt is the strong rock, that they had to rely again on it. When we got the Rafale, it was a surprise for everyone that Egypt will get the Rafale. Look, for instance, the Mistral, the two Mistral. It was made specially for the Russian Navy. And at that time, the Russians, when they had this conflict with the EU, they said, okay, we will choose another partner, and it's Egypt. And this was very important for Egypt's position at that time, because the whole EU was against us, especially Britain. And I think that the French could have said no. Well, they accepted, and at time of President Hollande. So I think that President Macron now is understanding very well the situation in the Middle East. There is instability in the Gulf region. There is now a new map in Syria, and it's in the hands of Russia. So the French power was diminishing, and I always told them that you have stood against the regime and against al-Assad, which is the legal regime there. Yes. You stood against them. You are ruining your history with them. They are very fond of the French language and the French culture. But you are ruining that by your own hands. And now Syria is the hands of Russia. So I think that they have made some mistakes in the region. They lost many partners. I think now they understand that the only remaining partner is Egypt. They understand that we have to get more and more close. It's not only about economics, because I think that we would not achieve anything economically or on the investment level if some problems in the regions wouldn't be solved, especially in Libya, because there is oil and there is always some interference from the Turks, and also in Syria. So, and the problem was Iran. So I think that the Turkish problem now, economically and geopolitically, is very annoying for both countries.
Yes.
So we're getting close.
Well, Dr. Amir, talking about geopolitically and economically now with the uncertainty. Yes, please go, Dr. Fain.
50s and 60s, we were not in good terms with France, because we stood with the Algerian versus the French in the 60s during the Nasser's era.
I mentioned the 1967 war. De Gaulle was pro-Egypt at that time, and there was an embargo against Israel.
50s and 60s, and they were in the 56 war versus Egypt anyway. So I mean, this era was not we were not that much in good terms together.
Well, talking about eras now, we are embarking on a new era, especially with Germany. The political future is not really certain. Nobody knows exactly how the German policy is going to change, as Chancellor Angela Merkel mentioned that she will be stepping down at the end of this term. Now, does that affect the situation in Europe politically and economically, and that's why other countries such as France is trying to safeguard its own policies and its own economic interests with the rest of the international community?
Look, Macron is trying to distinguish himself as a leader who is not following Donald Trump. From the first day he said it. And he's trying to show, because he got the reputation since the first day of his mandate, that he was the follower of Angela Merkel. And there was always these jokes about him that he's following her in everything. So I think now that he made the right option of choosing to be distant at a certain cases and voicing that he has different positions. The card that he's playing now is that I'm not pro-America. I was with Germany, but Germany would be the follower. I'm not the follower. So I think that he's trying to show the EU that I don't care about friends and allies, because the Brits are out. The Italians, it's not the relations are not very good with the French. So I think that President Macron is trying to show the world that, well, I have several obstacles, but I'm a different president, and I'm choosing different ways of maintaining our diplomatic relations. Look, for instance, they have excellent relations with Egypt, but he's always trying to make this problem of human rights and some choosing these. Why he's doing that? Because he's trying to tell the French that we have different positions. That could be a love-hate relationship with anyone. We have the positive and the negative. But let me tell you, the only signal that means that France is having excellent relations with the country is military. Is the military. And they always keen to supply us with the best of their technology, with the best prices, and the maneuvers. As I said, till now, this is not the first maneuver since President Macron became president and President Sisi is in office. It was we managed now to have it for let's say more than 10 times now, especially in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
That means that they are very interested in having excellent relations with Egypt because of the security.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before the next Africa-France summit that will be taking place in June in Bordeaux, Cairo will be hosting an Egyptian-French business forum that will be taking place next April. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Director of the Business France agency in Egypt, Philippe Garcia, applauded Egypt's economic reform policies, describing them as both promising and effective. Garcia said these policies had created a conducive investment environment for French companies. In special statements, ever since he assumed his duties in Egypt, Garcia, the new French commercial counselor in Cairo, shed light on the volume of trade exchange between both countries, which recorded 2.5 billion euros in 2018. With French exports registering 1.7 billion. However, he noted the trade volume surged during the first quarter of the fiscal year 2019-2020 to reach 1.3 billion euros, hitting a remarkable 23.5% increase. Speaking of French investments in Egypt in light of the mega national projects under construction, such as the new administrative capital and the Suez Canal corridor, Garcia said as many as 160 French companies are doing business in Egypt, especially in transport, construction, energy, tourism and communication sectors. He noted that French investors are keen on increasing their investments in Egypt, especially in mega-state projects, lauding the economic growth Egypt has been witnessing, which has exceeded 6%. He further revealed that preparations are underway for an Egyptian-French business forum to be organized by his cooperation. The event Cairo will host on April the 1st, 2020, will see a heavy participation by representatives of French companies. Meanwhile, French ambassador in Cairo, Stephanie Romata, said Egypt has become a key regional player in the oil and gas sectors, expressing French firms' desires to invest in Egypt, giving the country's full potential that helps it be an oil and gas hub in the entire East Mediterranean region. Romate lauded Egypt-France strong relations in all fields, which he said was made clear in close coordination and exchange visits between the two countries at all levels.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion. Dr. Fahim, now the amount of French investments in Egypt, it amounts to about $5 billion. The trade balance between both countries surged to 36.2% in 2019 alone, actually from January till May of 2019, about $1.2 billion. Now, where do we take it from there? What are the industries or the sectors that you feel the French companies and the French investment can really flourish and strengthen its involvement in the Egyptian economy?
We can see the petroleum sector. For example, I'm sorry to mention but big companies. Shell is withdrawing itself from the market, and it's a substitute by Total. You can see Total in every service station instead of Shell. In the petroleum sector, it's coming in the gas and oil field. I've heard that they're going into what we call it, in chemical sectors, and this we can see that. They were in Lafarge in the cement projects. Like we can see lots of like the French. I believe that they did not withdraw themselves from the market at all, and they are strengthening their positions.
Well, do you feel, you've mentioned the oil sector, do you feel
and
that...
petrochemicals,
and the petrochemicals. Now, Egypt is becoming, developing really and progressing really fast in the energy sector. Do you also feel any sort of cooperation that could be taking place in renewable energy?
Yes. You know, in the beginning, Europe had the plan of having they were joining the electric forces between Africa and Europe through two projects. The Mediterranean, it was supposed to be Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. This is the French project, and the Siemens project, it has another name, I cannot remember. That was the German project, which was the liaison between Egypt and Germany and Europe. But as we can see in the project of Bimban in Aswan, the solar project, the solar field, there are a lot of French projects there. They're coming into the new energy field, and I believe there is something that they will start to do with the electric stations for the electric cars. It's in the plan. They are making a new plan for charging as fueling the cars. And
Dr. Fahim, you've also mentioned the working on the infrastructure, which is of great interest for not just France, but the whole international community who are looking forward to investing and development in Egypt. How far do you think we've come so far in the development of the actual infrastructure, the roads, the transportation, the energy?
We are pre-passing almost 78% up to now. We're doing very fine. We can see it in the roads, we can see it in the trains, the airports, the ports, the strategic areas, the ports. We can see the electricity. It's 100%. The electric field. I believe we're reaching even 80% for the time being.
Yes, Dr. Amir. Now, a cornerstone of the relationship between Egypt and France has been the cultural cooperation. Now, a lot of people see it as some sort of a soft power, which it is, but they don't realize how important and how integral of a role it could play in enhancing political and economic relations between both countries. Now, France has opened many French cultural centers across different governorates. We've seen about 40 archaeological missions all over the country, be it in Cairo, Karnak, Aswan. Also, there's cooperation between Egypt and France in trying to open and develop the Grand Egyptian Museum. Obviously, everybody knows how the French culture is fond of the Egyptian civilization. How can we develop this relationship further? How much can this cultural interest between both countries take both people and both countries to another level?
Student exchange. This is one of the most important aspects, because when you prepare the youth, this is what they are doing in the French schools, for example. Unfortunately, they know our history better than us. They know all the kings of Egypt, of ancient Egypt, and the pharaohs. They know exactly the sites that you have mentioned. They know exactly which temple exists in which city. So they have specific data about Egypt and its history. So I think if we do the same thing, if we could start letting the young generation understand the importance of learning a new language, because we are an open world now. If we seek investment, one of the major things that helped Egypt in the previous decades, that see, for example, in the 1930s and the beginning of the century in Egypt, the average Egyptian used to understand Greek, Italian, French, English, because there were several communities, and this was very evaluating the Egyptian personality. I think that if we can start also by this cultural centers, also letting these missions come also to the schools and promote the French language, because the French are very, very fond also about the idea of learning the new language. They used to say, we will learn Arabic, so we will go to Morocco and Algeria, and then they used to say that the clear Arabic and the classic Arabic is in Egypt. So let's use the student exchange. Let's use also the learning of the new languages. We have all the material now. And let's use also let's say, the media. For example, here in NILE TV, there is French programs also. So we have to work on that we have to enhance that. Because the French language is very important also in all aspects, whether in economics, whether in science, and also in promoting Egypt's culture. So I think that the French are present as you said, everywhere in all what is cultural in Egypt. We have the French University, the Port Senghor University, the Faculty of Law of the Sorbonne University here in Egypt. So we have the basis. The only thing we need is to encourage the young people. Unfortunately, all the young people, when they went to the French schools in Egypt, they used to say French is very difficult to entertain, to talk. Well, we have to encourage them to learn it. And this will open several gates afterwards. The key is travel and language.
Definitely. Dr. Fahim, one final question now. We understand that Egypt will be hosting the Egypt-France Business Forum in April, but there is the Africa-France Summit that will be taking place in June in Bordeaux. Now, this will be attended by President Sisi and a lot of African leaders of different African states. Do you feel that now that Egypt is not the president of the African Union, do you feel that the dynamics in the relationship or Egypt's participation in such a forum could change? Would it give us more time to actually focus on our own interests than all the African interests? How do you see it?
No, at all. It would be the same. Egypt is still being a leader doesn't have to be. You don't have to have the name. You know, you're the leader of Africa. Okay, and as we say, we're the gate. We're the gate to Africa, and we are trying to help Africa to not to be used again. Misused by the West like before. And that's what we're trying to reach with the French and with the Germans, actually, for the time being. I believe with the Italians too. The British are starting to understand the idea. They all are trying to understand this aspect, this ideology of we have to put our hands just together. It's a win-win situation. It's either win-win or it's no situation at all. And Egypt is trying to make this kind of defending Africa. These are our brothers, and it's our union. Okay, we are Africans in the end of the days, and we will not allow any person to penetrate Africa and to misuse it again. So everybody is understanding it, even the Africans. Okay, forget about the dam. It has nothing to do with this. It's, I mean, the whole Africans now, they can understand. We can reach this understanding together. So being a CEO is not being a leader. Okay, we are the leaders in the end of the day, and we have the same goals, the same objectives, and what we're trying to do with our economics, and we're trying to improve in the infrastructure, and this is based on how they are trying to do their industry here, French, Chinese, Russians, to go to Africa. Okay, so it's already a link. It's a very strong link now for the time being.
Yes.
Okay, and there is no time to improve the infrastructure in Africa. They cannot do it. Okay, so now we cannot find the right electricity, for example, for the industry, the right roads, the right ports. So it has to be done here and then transported to Africa afterwards.
Yes, and do it quickly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, obviously these summits, these forums are only steps that we are taking very quickly to enhance the Egyptian economy in relation to other international cooperation and international economies as well. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. I'd also like to thank very much Dr. Rami Fahim, the strategic planning expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on NILE International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.